I'd like to introduce you to my hero, Dani. Looking at her contagious smile and those laughing eyes, you might not ever guess what an incredible force of will and strength and perseverance lies behind them. She lives in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. When she was younger, she used to help her mother with the barbecue that she vended along the streets in the market area there. One day, it was January 12th, 2010. Dani was bathing, and she says she felt a shake. She heard her baby niece crying out from where she and Dani's mother were inside their house. So she ran toward the house and pushed her niece outside, like literally saving her, because just then concrete began collapsing in on her and her mother. An upper patio deck fell on young Dani, crushing her arm and pinning her beneath the rubble. Dani's mother died that day. Dani spent 8 days suffering there beneath the fallen home, the smell of death filling her lungs with every breath. She knew she would die too. She knew she would. So, in her last effort to survive, she cried out again and again, like begging, just pleading and screaming for someone to please, just please bring her a knife. And finally, someone did. And my hero, Dani, amputated her own arm to get free. Dani was not able to get access to a hospital for care until 5 days after she cut off her arm. It was a wonder she was able to survive it all. In the beginning, Dani lived on top of the rubble of her childhood home. With her father already gone, and now her mother, she had no one to take care of her. As foreign aid began to pour in, she moved into what they called a tent city near the airport, and that's where she lives still. Many of the people, who live there today are still actually using the tarps donated for temporary shelters back then, and they're protecting them from the elements now. I met Dani nearly 7 years after the earthquake while visiting a clinic called Healing Hands for Haiti. The nonprofit, I work for, the Enable Community Foundation, is doing some work with the Haitian prosthetist Cindy and Francois to give, access to prostheses to people with the greatest need. I'd say, Dani is more than a little famous within our group since she was one of the very first recipients of one of the 3D printed prosthetic arms a prosthetist in our group, Jeff, was able to deliver there last year. And I have to say, I felt a bond with her immediately. My colleagues and I took Dani and another arm recipient, Ebby, out for dinner that first night we met, to thank them for their strength and their involvement and their openness in the program and willingness to share their stories and their lives with us. So, Jhonson, our fearless driver, mentioned that it might actually have been the first time Dani had ever even been to a restaurant. It took the team, 3 cars to get to the place, and Dani and I were together with her and our driver in the front seat, and I sat riding in the back seat with her arm. She and I arrived at the restaurant some 20 minutes before everyone else. I didn't speak but a few words of Creole, and she didn't speak but a few words in English. So we sort of sat at a table, just her and I, kind of staring at each other. We both started to laugh at our kind of ridiculous situation and inability to speak at one another. But somehow, by the time everyone else arrived, we'd had such a wonderful time together. I forgot that we weren't able to speak the same language. And, it wasn't until others got to the table and saw us laughing together and having a good old time that one of my colleagues looked at me and says, I didn't know you spoke Creole. Oh, yeah, I don't. At the end of that night, though, Dani pulled me aside, bringing along our driver to help her translate. She looked at me and somehow like pinned me there with these fierce, piercing eyes, and she pled with me, "Can you help me? Can you help me get out of there?" She was talking about where she lived in the airport tent city. She was talking about this place where she and her baby daughter had to live in constant fear, a place ruled by gang leaders until they were killed and then another took their place. A place where women were regularly raped while using the latrine or trying to bathe. This place didn't have access to clean water. She has to pull water from a dirty stream and pour drops of Clorox in it to drink. She has to beg for food for herself and her daughter on these like crazy dangerous streets, and many days she'd go without eating at all. She doesn't want to have to beg, and she and her young daughter aren't safe. Can you help me? Yes. Yes, I promise you I will try. So this is me trying. 2 days after our poignant dinner together, my colleague Sam, our driver Jhonson, and myself went to see Dani at her home. She was kind enough to allow us to spend the day with her on the 7th anniversary of the quake, or the wobble, as many Haitians referred to it. It was the 7th anniversary of the disaster that took her mother from her and also took her arm and changed her life dramatically. I wasn't sure, if she was aware of the date when we arrived. There wasn't exactly electricity where she lived, or internet, or cell phones, or any of the things that remind people of dates, and I wasn't going to remind her. I simply would do anything at that point to make sure she had a happy day, no matter what it took. And made sure to be in a small group, as we entered the tent city for her and her daughter's safety. If others were to see too many Americans coming in to visit her, it could potentially be dangerous. They could assume we'd given her money and she could, be in some way targeted or robbed. It's just something you need to consider. So, people there are starving, so desperate. And all eyes were on us as we made our way with Jhonson to her home. Dani was there and welcomed us, in with her usual enormous, just beautiful smile. And it was this small room made of kind of patched together wood. There was a small bed that she shared with her daughter, and basically little else. She probably had only 10 items maybe total in her possession. And when Sam and I came in, she gave us one of them as a gift. I could have just like died in that moment from how incredibly touching the sentiment was. It was a handmade bottle with the words "Healing Hands for Haiti" painted on it. Just overwhelming. So we took her out for the day and she showed us a lot of the city. And at one point, we stopped at a park that commemorated the Haitian Revolution and got her an ice cream cone. She totally inhaled it, and like part of mine. It was the best thing ever. And then she sang for us. It was just so entirely sweet.
I like you, I love the depression. See the right now, everything I do. See how know what's the light. This is la lucky.
You're so good. She's good.
She was having that happy day I desperately wanted to give her. And then she started singing "Happy Birthday" in English. And when it got to the end, she said, "Happy birthday, dear Dani. I am 7. I am 7 today." She knew what day it was all along. We stopped in a neighborhood just outside the city that Jhonson knew of, where there were affordable houses that had solar electricity and access to water, and where Dani and her daughter could be safe. The neighbors were friendly, and one who came, to say hi was in a wheelchair, so if Dani moved there, she'd have others near her that could relate to the difficulties that can come with living with access technologies. Her daughter could have access to a free school there. They'd be on the route for tap taps, a kind of Haitian bus system. With a house and a freezer, Dani could easily start a business selling cold drinks there. It's a common way to earn a living in Haiti. She could support herself and her family, so she'd no longer need to beg simply to eat. She could get a fresh start, become independent, feel good and confident about herself, and earn the $30 a month she'd need to remain in the neighborhood if we could just somehow help her pay for that house to begin with. After a fantastic day with Dani, we gave her some food to bring home with her, and Jhonson dropped Sam and I back off at the clinic guest house where we were staying. And then he took my hero, Dani, back to her tent city. Help me get out of there. I will, Dani. I will try.